Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. Today I'm here with Aidan Smith, my friend who does work for Data for Progress. How are you doing today?
Really well, thank you.
That's good. So you, about a month ago or so, you wrote an article in Salon about how Joe Biden's presidency could be the most progressive presidency in recent history. You outlined some reasons as to why that could be, or if he were to do certain things, how that would be. So first question I have here is, what are some ways Biden could make his foreign policy more progressive, at least in terms of staffing at the State Department?
Well, just to, before that, I'd just like to clarify, when I say that discuss the possibility of Biden's president being more progressive than Obama's or Bill Clinton's, it's not so much as a prediction, more so as, highlighting an opportunity for progressive groups to push Biden to the left on the issues. For the record, I think he's much more amenable to being pushed left than even Hillary Clinton is. And that's somewhat of an odd statement to make because, within the context of the 2020 Democratic primary, Biden is probably to the right of what Hillary was within the context of the 2016 primary. But despite that, when it comes to matters of staffing, that's really where I think it's a difference between him and Clinton. And this is what really inspired this project because, Hillary, when she's running, she loves management. She had an idea for every single post for every single office. That's a really rare thing when you run for president. It's unsurprising given that Hillary was Secretary of State, but she personally, not just her team, but according to sources, even during the spring of 2016, she was thinking about who she wants to staff the State Department with top to bottom, putting people like Tony Blinken. Hilariously, there was even some speculation that she'd put John Podesta at the helm of Department of State. That was never verified, but the source who leaked it, if you even want to call it that, was saying that she wanted someone who wasn't a career diplomat so that she could more effectively manage the DOS's affairs from the White House. But the point is, to me and other progressive groups, we don't think too much about cabinet composition, but personnel is policy. And I think if the left is organized and ready to push our choices for positions, not just in the cabinet, but sub-agencies or choices for independent commissions, I think Biden is much more amenable to that than Clinton or even Obama was, purely because he's just not particularly interested in the cabinet composition process in the same way Hillary was, and because the left is just stronger than it was in 2008. But on the subject of foreign policy, for anyone who's read the Progressive Cabinet Project, and I would urge any listener to do so, and not just because of my part in it, but really because when I call it historic, it's not just me adding on a bunch of pretty adjectives. I mean, it really is the first time a progressive group has ever done something like this publicly. For so long, progressives have just put cabinet and administrative matters on the back burner. And that did not work out because when you look at, Obama's cabinet, the most progressive person was Tom Perez in the second term. And I don't need to go more into that. But I will say, though, in the Progressive Cabinet Project, we do talk about why it's hard for us to staff these departments. And, it's pretty obvious why. The left has been systematically ostracized from American public life. There's very few people who were assistant secretary of state for material logistics or et cetera, who are, committed non-interventionists, let alone like anti-imperialist stalwarts like a lot of the left would like to see. That makes our bench very difficult to find. And not just because of that, but also because we have very few politicians who even served on, let's say, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which could therefore prepare them for a top foreign policy post. And thirdly, we're also usually excluded from positions on top foreign policy think tanks. And in the domestic field, this is a little less extreme. Like, for example, in the Department of Labor under Obama, even though Tom Perez wasn't the most progressive individual, there were a lot of really good people within DOL who are firmly, allied with the Bernie and Warren wing of the party. You have people like Sharon Block, who we mentioned in the report, who would be, a perfect choice for a Democratic Socialist administration's Secretary of Labor, who fully has the pedigree to do so. But that's different when it comes to foreign policy because, like I said, the Department of State, we don't have some massive short list of people who served as assistant secretary for whatever. People who served at the Pentagon or at Foggy Bottom are generally either neoconservatives or liberal interventionists who look at the world through a slightly different theoretical lens and see it through a different model, but in general have been conditioned to support interventionism above all, and generally think that, anti-militaristic efforts are a juvenile left-wing fantasy pie in the sky idea. It's very hard to find people genuinely committed to not even look, we're not looking for, hardline socialists in the DOS, but you'd be surprised just how few there are who are even, allied with the likes of Warren or Ro Khanna or Bernie Sanders on really basic issues, like, let's say, opposing the Israeli occupation of Palestine, opposing, Saudi's war in Yemen. That one is changing a bit, but it's took a while. But the point is, for foreign policy, that's going to be the most difficult. So in our report, we had very little to work with. So for DOS, we mentioned Russ Feingold. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Russ Feingold, one of the best senators of the last 30 years. Also served as, little people know this, but he's also a former ambassador. He served as U.S. Special Envoy to the African Great Lakes in Congo-Kinshasa. So he intimately worked during the Congolese crisis. It also wasn't just some symbolic post. He was actually there and was taking part in negotiations on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So again, that's usually where, if a senator is going to be chosen for the post, they're going to have been on that committee. One of the few vocal opponents of the Iraq War during the 2000s in the Senate. Just to be clear, Feingold is as close to perfect for the post as could be. We also mentioned Ro Khanna. Khanna is not a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, but he is on the House Armed Forces Committee, so he does take part in a foreign policy legislative committee. He's, of course, been a huge leader of the progressive left on, a lot of issues, but especially foreign policy, especially ending the war in Yemen. So we mentioned him for both state and defense. He also has executive experience as a former deputy assistant secretary within the DOC during the Obama years. We also mentioned Tom Perriello, one who's, Perry Law is interesting. He only served one term in Congress from 2009 to 2011, but I mean, the guy has had just such an enormous impact on American politics. He's so well respected by both the left, Bernie endorsed him when he ran for governor, and also more conventional liberals. He's solid on foreign policy. He served within the State Department as State Department envoy for the African Great Lakes and Congo Kinshasa. He actually replaced Feingold in that capacity. So, we mentioned him for both UN ambassador and Secretary of State. Either way, he has the pedigree. And finally, for Secretary of State, we also mentioned Jeff Merkley. And Jeff Merkley, we often think there's only 3 progressive senators. We just, Bernie, we have Warren, we have Ed Markey. But Jeff Merkley is really the 4th senator who can really be considered on the left. It's unfortunate we don't have more than that, but Merkley's been great on virtually all domestic issues. Pro Medicare for all, pro Green New Deal, supported Bernie 2016, only senator to do so, if I may point out. Very good on foreign policy, on ending domestic surveillance, which could also qualify him for, say, Director of National Intelligence or Central Intelligence Agency Director. But he's on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's a non-interventionist. He has the pedigree as both a member of the Senate and, on this very prestigious committee that generally makes you an obvious choice for, Secretary of State. So those are the 4. And it's, like we said, it's very difficult for the left to make a short list for FP positions. But Data for Progress, this is as far as I'm concerned, this is the most conclusive attempt at doing so a progressive organization has ever released regarding, cabinet matters. So it really was just an honor to be able to work on this for the past almost 6 months.
All right. And in the article, you also talk about the Department of Justice. What are some specific ways that Biden could run things differently if elected, make things more progressive?
So the Department of Justice is, it really takes no introduction to talk about what, Trump, Jeff Sessions, and Bill Barr have done at the helm of the DOJ. I don't want to make some comment like they've turned it into the Department of Injustice. I'm pretty sure I have typed that once, but I don't want to say that out loud because that actually sounds really corny to say verbally. But I mean, just the degree to which the Department of Justice has just been complacent in just complete dereliction of duty, just going out of their way to do the most petty, cruel things towards marginalized people, be it undocumented immigrants or trans people. Petty cruelty that is just like almost to the degree of like surreality. But, excuse me. But it's also important, though, that we don't react to like the horrors committed by the Trump DOJ by saying we just need to turn back the clock to the Obama years. Because during the Obama years, we had people like Eric Holder at the helm of the DOJ who were just simply, he took some decent initiatives on civil rights. There was some progress made, say, within the realm of, marijuana policy with the Cole memo, as they call it. But he was very weak. It's famous that people complain that Holder, the famous slogan, like Holder didn't prosecute the bankers. We can argue all day about like whether he had the opportunity to do so. But what we can't argue with is the fact that a lot of the Obama era DOJ was staffed with people with corporate law alumni, very few people chosen for U.S. attorney posts who weren't alumni of big law firms in NYC or DC. I'm forgetting the name, but there's also the infamous case. Matt Stoller likes to talk about this a lot. The assistant attorney general for the antitrust division was generally not sympathetic to antitrust policy, something you'd expect when the GOP appoints someone. But I would like progressive groups to invest not only in the staffing of the DOJ at the top with people committed to civil rights, and prosecuting white collar crime, but also staffing top to bottom, with assistant AG positions, and U.S. attorney positions who are committed to the progressive agenda. So for AG, the names we mentioned, we have 5 on our list for Attorney General. And mind you, there were some others we definitely thought of. We just had to simplify a lot of this list. We mentioned, Vanita Gupta. Vanita Gupta is an ACLU alum. She served as acting assistant attorney general for civil rights during the Obama era. To be clear, Vanita Gupta isn't a left-wing radical. She's very much a mainstream liberal, but that's still, very much welcome to have someone, firmly committed to, just for example, she took ICE to court during the 2000s over inhumane treatment of prisoners. She's very strong on civil rights policy. We also has like the pedigree for it as a former assistant AG. We also mentioned Keith Ellison. Keith has just been an invaluable leader of the progressive movement for almost 15 years now. And, in the past year, as Attorney General of Minnesota, he's just simply the best Attorney General in the country. There's no real, competition there. Taken so much initiative on protecting workers' rights, protecting civil rights, going after police brutality when the Hennepin County DA's office is unable or unwilling to do the same. He's taken initiative. I definitely think he should be the person we look to, who progressive groups look to during the transition period, to push for. We also mentioned Jenny Yang. Jenny Yang is wonderful. We also have her on the list for Department of Labor. She's a former Department of Justice trial lawyer turned fellow at the Urban League. She served under Obama as a member and chair of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. She worked really hard for protecting the civil rights of trans people against discriminatory employers. Very strong on labor issues too. She's been, in addition to her fighting for civil rights, she's also been pushing really hard to, and what is it called? Blanking on it. She's been working really hard to end non-compete clauses in which bosses can prevent people from working in other firms in a particular industry, which is just obscene. And she's been working really tirelessly against that, which also would make her a good fit for DOL. We also mentioned Larry Krasner, who's just been a trailblazer as DA of Philadelphia for AG. For the record, county DAs have been promoted to the AG post before. Janet Reno was state's attorney, i.e. Florida's equivalent of DA, in Miami-Dade County. Philadelphia County is, of course, a massive constituency, larger than some states. It's a massive city. He's definitely qualified for the post, even if he would surely face opposition in a confirmation hearing. And lastly, we mentioned Barbara Underwood. She's served as Solicitor General of New York and as briefly as Attorney General of New York for about 6 months in 2018. She racked up just an enviable list of progressive accomplishments against groups like ExxonMobil, against Walmart, against the Trump Foundation, who she got to dissolve. Well qualified for the post. So any one of these 5 would just be historic in the role.
All right. So in the article, you didn't specifically talk much about healthcare, but how do you think Biden could be better when it comes to healthcare?
I'd like to see, for the Department of Health and Human Services, we talk about staffing this crucial department with people committed to healthcare as a human right, to putting an end to corporate profiteering in healthcare, committed to importation of drugs from Canada, and Europe and Japan to bring down consumer drug prices. Some of the names we've mentioned who I would definitely want the Biden administration to look at and for progressive groups to push. We mentioned Abdul El-Sayed. He really deserves little introduction. I mean, like, just a brilliant leader in our movement, served as Detroit health director, served within the Health and Human Services Department as an advisor for I think it's called the Healthy 2020 initiative. Has an MD, I believe has an MPH, brilliant orator, brilliant MD, brilliant healthcare policy advisor, one of the foremost people in the fight to make, healthcare as a human right a reality in the United States. County municipal officials have been promoted to cabinet posts before. I would, for example, Arne Duncan, I believe he was head of Cook County Public Schools before he became Secretary of Education. So Abdul would be, top of the list to look at for an HHS post. Ideally secretary, but maybe something else within the department. I'd also really urge that Donald Berwick be looked at for the post. For people unacquainted, Berwick, during the Obama years, position of administrator of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That's the most crucial sub-agency, in my and other opinions, within the Department of Health and Human Services. He's a pediatrician by training. He's a supporter of single payer, which is why Republicans hated him so much. He's a supporter of the NHS and is actually probably to the left of even a lot of progressive Democrats on healthcare, because he really wants to see the NHS model emulated in the United States. Well qualified for the post. He would be brilliant in it. And other people's we've mentioned, we also mentioned, Pramila Jayapal. She is the single biggest legislative leader in the fight for Medicare for All. The Jayapal plan for Medicare for All is even bolder than Bernie's or John Conyers was when he took up the reign with it in like 2017. Her plan for Medicare for All would cover reproductive health services, completely out of no charge, vision care, dental health care, hearing care, optical care, etc. And lastly, we also mentioned Georges Benjamin, he's the head of the he's a physician leader, former Secretary of Health in Maryland, former health commissioner in the District of Columbia, also served under the Obama administration on the National Infrastructure Council in an advisory capacity. So he combines support for healthcare as a human right. He's a universal healthcare supporter. He's a doctor. He's interested in public health, especially with regards to racial disparities in health outcomes. And also has like federal government experience being on the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. So those are the four people we mentioned who should really be considered for top healthcare positions and who should be pushed by progressive groups during the transition period.
All right. And where do you think Obama failed when it came to picking a decent cabinet or staffing within these certain agencies?
Well, I mean, above all else, if I was going to lay the blame on one person within Obama's inner circle, it really can't be stressed enough how much better things would have been if Rahm Emanuel was not chosen as chief of staff during the crucial first 100 days. And I mean, the first 2 years of the Obama administration. Emanuel is just simply a political conservative. He doesn't support progressive policy goals like universal health care or an end to extreme poverty. These are issues he does not even support in the abstract. He is fully fine with staffing the administration with some Republicans, Bush alumni, corporate law alumni, Wall Street alumni. And while he wasn't the only person to have a part in the cabinet composition process, I do think we might have been able to see at least a handful of progressives, kind of like Robert Reich, in cabinet roles had someone else been there at the time.
All right. And let's see. And how do you think the election will turn out? And do you think that it's a real possibility that Biden could end up having the most progressive presidency within recent history?
For the former, I'd say Biden is clearly favored, but not inevitable, and it's always bad to be, cocky about these things. For the second, it's not, when I'm talking about Biden having a progressive administration, it's not a prediction. It is me saying that progressive groups need to mobilize and realize that if we keep winning, primaries and create a bigger actual progressive caucus within Congress, we'll have more authority, and that personnel is policy. And if we do want to make Biden's cabinet the most progressive in recent memory, that means we're going to actually have to look at the cabinet composition process and look at people to push in the meantime.
Okay. And have you paid much attention to the policy task force that the campaigns came up with at all?
Not in particular. I am very disappointed with regards to marijuana policy. There's really no excuse for a Democratic president not to just sign an executive order legalizing weed. It would be politically popular to do so. It's the right thing, and it's very frustrating that the Democratic apparatus still can't commit to such, a basic policy proposal. Other than that, no, I haven't. I have liked seeing what progressive names have been chosen for each. But with regards to, the actual outcome of all of them, I didn't pay particularly much attention. It's all symbolic, pretty much. I don't think progressives should get complacent or be particularly discouraged for that matter either way, because platform stuff is just a purely symbolic thing in the US. It's not like we have manifestos the same way the Labor Party does, where it's semi-binding in a way. These are really just symbolic and just the result of the dynamics of a particular primary season. So either way, it doesn't, I'm not going to be too excited when I see that my favorite progressives were on some of these, task force committee. And likewise, I'm not going to, be extremely disappointed if some of the results of these task force didn't go in the way I hoped for,
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have here.
Cool.
Thank you for coming on. Where can we find you on social media?
Aidan Smith 2020 at Twitter.
All right, cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Ben. Take care.
You too.